So, what's a workflow? In your organization or mine, a workflow is a process that proceeds from one activity to the next until it's complete. So, in this example, perhaps we have a phone call with a customer. And after we take the phone call, someone fills out an order form. That order form is then sent to a supervisor who determines whether a group of people need to work on it or whether it can simply be filed and then acknowledged with an email or a letter back. In this particular workflow, there are two different branches, one that requires a little more human effort and one that doesn't. But this same workflow could just as easily be a vacation request. I'm applying for a vacation, so I fill out the form. I give it to my supervisor. My supervisor can approve it and pass it along to HR, and I get an email back that says, hey, have a great vacation. Or perhaps my supervisor doesn't have the authority and needs to send it to somebody else, perhaps their manager, to sign off on it before it goes to HR. And then I either get to go on vacation or not. This type of workflow is common in any organization that's not very small. And normally, all of these workflows have artifacts that go along with them, forms that get filled out, an envelope where more things are added as the workflow continues and it's passed from one hand to the next. We often think we're in pretty good shape if what we've done is replaced a paper form with something that we can send by email. But still, if the people in this process have to keep track of where every item is and where it goes next, this process, any workflow process, can get bogged down at almost any point along the way. There are three broad types of workflows. You can create workflows to work with lists, you can create workflows that are reusable, and you can create site workflows. A list workflow is normally launched with a brand new item. Somebody creates a form and saves it in a list. Somebody adds a new item to a list. Lists also include libraries, so it might be that I've dropped a document in a library or submitted an InfoPath form. And every single SharePoint list and library is already workflow enabled. They're ready to take on workflows. So you'll see the workflow icon at the right-hand side of every single ribbon for a list or library. The second type of workflow is called a reusable workflow. And we create reusable workflows using either Visual Studio or SharePoint Designer, a free tool that we can use to work with SharePoint. And a reusable workflow is exactly what the name implies. It's a workflow that does something basic that we want to do in many places in the enterprise. So it might, for example, be a workflow that says, take this document and put it in a particular library. The library might be a library where we review items, but people on different team sites might want to be able to send items to that same library. But groups from various sites or working in different libraries might want to put a document in a particular location. Or it could be an approval workflow. A document is placed in the library, someone needs to approve it in a particular fashion. Or it could be simply an acknowledgement that a form or a document was actually received. The third type of workflow is a site workflow, and if you haven't worked with workflows in a while, but you've worked with them in the past, you might think, what is this? Because it was a new type in the previous version of SharePoint. A site workflow is a workflow that doesn't even need a list or a library. It's assigned directly to a site. Regardless of the type of workflow that fits in your situation, using SharePoint to animate workflows is just an amazing relief in almost any organization because many of the processes we're discussing are processes that are supporting functions for the business. So we're going to switch over here to a library. If you've ever started a workday by calling around to find out who has the form that you need to complete, or where we are in an employee onboarding process, or exactly who has a document that needs to be signed to approve a new vendor, you'll appreciate the ability to open up a SharePoint list or library and be able to get information from a workflow that says when a form was submitted and who's working on it right now. You don't have to keep track of it because we can set up a workflow process so SharePoint will do it for us. And you'll know that this automated workflow is being well managed by SharePoint Online.